Welcome back to Econosphere, where we break down the complex world of economics into digestible insights. Today, we're tackling a controversial question that's been buzzing through economic circles. Could a recession actually be good for us right now? Now, before you think I've lost my mind, hear me out. We're living in unprecedented times economically speaking, and some very smart people are arguing that our economy might need what they call a controlled burn to clear out the financial underbrush that's been building up for decades. Let's start with the elephant in the room: debt. Imagine if you borrowed money from your neighbor, who borrowed from their friend, who borrowed from their cousin, and so on until everyone in your entire city owed everyone else money. That's essentially where we are globally right now, except instead of a city, we're talking about the entire planet. The world currently carries $315 trillion in total debt. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 3 times everything the entire world produces in a year. Think about that for a moment. If aliens came down and took every single thing humanity made for 3 straight years, that would barely cover what we owe each other. This means that roughly 10% of everything we create globally just goes to paying interest on money we've already borrowed. It's like running on a treadmill where the speed keeps increasing, but you're not actually getting anywhere. But here's where it gets interesting. Over the past several decades, we've become really good at one thing: pumping money into the economy whenever things get tough. It's like having a friend who always shows up with pizza when you're having a bad day. The problem is, we've gotten so used to this economic comfort food that we've forgotten how to let natural cycles play out. Think of it this way: imagine a forest that never experiences small fires. All the dead branches, dry leaves, and undergrowth just keep accumulating. When a fire finally does start, it's not a small, manageable burn anymore. It becomes a massive, destructive blaze that's much worse than if smaller fires had been allowed to clear things out naturally. That's essentially what many economists argue has happened to our global economy. We've prevented all the small economic fires for so long that we've created conditions for a much bigger one. Now, you might be wondering what I mean by natural economic cycles. Let's dive into that, because understanding this is crucial to grasping why some people think a recession might actually help us. Historically, economies have always had ups and downs. During the tough times, something important happened. Businesses that weren't adding real value would fail, freeing up resources, money, workers, office space, equipment for more productive uses. It's like cleaning out your garage. Sure, it's painful to throw away that exercise bike you never used, but now you have space for something you'll actually use. The dot-com crash in 2001 is a perfect example. Remember Pets.com? They spent millions of dollars on Super Bowl ads to sell dog food online when most people barely knew what the internet was. When that bubble burst, it was painful. Lots of people lost jobs, and many investors lost money. But all those resources that were being wasted on selling overpriced pet supplies online became available for companies that would actually change the world. Think Google, Facebook, and Amazon in their early days. But here's where our current situation gets tricky. Look around today and you'll see some striking similarities to those bubble days. We have digital currencies named after internet memes that are worth more than car companies that have been building vehicles for over a century. We have companies raising billions of dollars with business plans that essentially boil down to: Step 1. Collect underpants. Step 2. Question mark. Step 3. Profit. This is what economists call misallocation of resources, and it's a fancy way of saying we're putting our money, time, and talent into things that don't actually make our lives better or our economy stronger. So here's where the plot thickens. Some economists are looking at our current global situation and thinking that maybe, just maybe, we're about to get that forest fire whether we want it or not. Trade tensions between major economic powers are escalating. There are actual shooting wars in economically important regions, and supply chains that took decades to build are being questioned and restructured. But before we go further, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what a recession actually is, because it's not as straightforward as you might think. In simple terms, a recession means we're producing less stuff than we were before for a sustained period of time. But economists being economists, they can't agree on exactly how long sustained means, or exactly how much less counts as significant. Some say 2 quarters, others say 6 months, and some institutions have their own special formulas. It's intentionally a bit vague because just saying the word recession can make things happen. It's like yelling fire in a crowded theater. Even if there's just a tiny bit of smoke, people are going to panic and rush for the exits. Now, here's something that might blow your mind. For the past 250 years, the world has generally produced about 3% more stuff each year than the year before. That might not sound like much, but thanks to the magic of compound growth, we now make about 150 times more stuff annually than we did at the start of the Industrial Revolution. And get this, there are only about 7 times more people now than there were back then. So the average person today has access to roughly 20 times more goods and services than someone from the early 1800s. Pretty incredible when you think about it. But this growth hasn't been smooth. There have been interruptions some we can understand, like wars, pandemics, or natural disasters that physically disrupted our ability to make things. Remember how COVID shut down factories and messed up shipping? That's what we call a supply shock, something external that hits our ability to produce. But then there are other times when we produce less stuff for no clear physical reason. A visitor from Mars looking down at Earth in 2008 wouldn't have seen any obvious reason why the global economy suddenly tanked. These are demand-side recessions, where we have the ability to make things, but people and businesses get scared and stop spending, which creates a vicious cycle. Here's how that cycle works. Businesses see fewer customers, so they cut costs by laying off workers. Those unemployed workers spend less money, which means even fewer customers for businesses, which leads to more layoffs, and so on. It's like an economic death spiral, but one that happens mostly in our collective psychology rather than in the physical world. Now, Here's the controversial part that makes some economists think these painful periods might actually serve a purpose. When businesses fail during recessions, they don't just disappear into thin air. The office space they were renting becomes available for other companies. The workers they employed can find jobs elsewhere. The investment money that was keeping them alive can flow to better opportunities. It's brutal, especially for regular people who are just trying to pay their bills and weren't speculating on risky investments. But from a cold, mathematical perspective, recessions do force economies to stop doing unproductive things and redirect resources toward more promising activities. Let's look at what happened after 2008. That recession was triggered by the housing bubble. Basically, we'd turned houses from places to live into lottery tickets for speculation. When that crashed, it was devastating for millions of families. But it also shifted investment away from just flipping houses and toward other types of businesses and innovations. Interestingly, countries like Canada and Australia didn't experience the full force of that recession because their banking systems were more regulated and housing hadn't become as speculative. But many economists argue that's exactly why housing prices in those countries are so out of control today. They never had that clearing out moment that forced a reset. Now, I want to be very clear here. I'm not advocating for recessions or suggesting that economic pain is good. That would be like saying chemotherapy is good because it kills cancer cells, while ignoring that it makes patients incredibly sick. There are usually better, more targeted ways to solve economic problems than letting everything crash and hoping for the best. But understanding why some economists think this way helps us grasp what might be happening in our current situation. So let's talk about why recessions hurt so much, because it's not just about making less stuff. If a widget factory normally produces 10 million widgets per quarter but only produces 9 million for 2 quarters in a row, that's technically a recession. But the economy still has 9 million new widgets, plus all the widgets from previous quarters that haven't worn out yet. The problem is that not everything we produce lasts forever. Food gets eaten, medicine gets consumed, and even things that should last require constant maintenance. We actually made a video last year about how rust alone costs the global economy more than the entire economic output of India. Just keeping our existing stuff from falling apart requires enormous ongoing effort. But the bigger issue in modern economies is services. These are things that have value but are consumed the moment they're produced. Think about a haircut, a tax consultation, or a plumber fixing your pipes. Most advanced economies actually produce more value through services than physical goods, so when service demand drops, there's no inventory to fall back on. This brings us to why modern recessions feel so much scarier than they used to, and it connects back to that massive debt pile we talked about earlier. When everyone owes everyone else money, even small disruptions become much more dangerous. Think of debt like blood pressure. A little bit of pressure is necessary to keep the system working, but too much pressure means that any small injury becomes a major emergency. That's where we are now. So much of our economic activity is financed by borrowed money that even small disruptions can cascade into major problems. Here's the thing about debt. It's based on the assumption that tomorrow will be better than today. When you borrow money, you're essentially betting that you'll have more income in the future to pay it back. That works fine when economies grow steadily, but when growth stalls or reverses, those bets start looking very risky. And speaking of risky bets, let's talk about who really gets hurt when recessions hit. It's not evenly distributed, and that's putting it mildly. If you have substantial savings and investments, a recession might actually be an opportunity. Asset prices drop, so you can buy stocks, real estate, or businesses at discount prices. You might see the nominal value of your existing investments fall, but if you don't need to sell immediately, you can often ride it out and benefit from the recovery. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, and that describes the majority of workers in most countries, even a small reduction in economic activity can be devastating. You don't have a cushion to absorb a temporary loss of income, and you can't take advantage of lower asset prices because you don't have spare money to invest. This is why the controlled burn analogy for recessions breaks down when you consider the human cost. Forest fires don't discriminate much between different types of trees, but economic fires tend to consume the financially vulnerable while leaving the wealthy relatively unscathed. So, given all this context, let's examine whether the current global situation represents the kind of recession we need to have. Right now, many advanced economies are probably in what economists would technically call a recession, though as usual, it depends on exactly how you define it. Global trade has been disrupted by tariff disputes, particularly between the United States and China. There's uncertainty about supply chains that took decades to build. Traditional alliances are being questioned, and new ones are forming. The theory goes something like this: maybe we've become too dependent on globalization. Sure, it's made many things cheaper and more efficient, but it's also made us vulnerable to disruptions and has arguably contributed to job losses in certain sectors and regions. Instead of waiting for this system to eventually collapse under its own contradictions, maybe it's better to intentionally restructure it now. But here's the problem with that logic. Induced recessions are not precise tools. They're more like using a sledgehammer when you need a scalpel. If the goal is to rebalance the economy away from unproductive activities and toward more sustainable ones, there are much better ways to do that than creating widespread economic chaos and hoping it works out. Think about it this way. If you had a headache, would you ask someone to hit you over the head with a baseball bat? The pain might distract you from the headache, but you'd probably end up with much bigger problems. The current situation is particularly concerning because it's not really a natural economic correction. It's more like someone decided to throw a grenade into the forest instead of letting natural fires clear out the underbrush. The disruption is likely to be much more severe and less targeted than a typical recession. Moreover, we're trying to do this at a time when our economic system is already under tremendous pressure from that debt burden we discussed. It's like trying to perform surgery on a patient who's already in critical condition. The risks are much higher, and the chances of unintended consequences are enormous. There's also a timing issue. Many of the economic imbalances that might benefit from correction, like asset bubbles or misallocated resources, have been building up in specific sectors. But broad-based trade disputes and geopolitical tensions don't target those specific problems. They're more likely to damage healthy parts of the economy along with the unhealthy ones. Consider small businesses that depend on international supply chains, or workers in industries that have nothing to do with speculative bubbles but happen to be exposed to global trade. These people and businesses could be severely harmed by policies designed to address completely different economic problems. And then there's the confidence factor. Economic systems run on trust and predictability. Businesses invest in new equipment, hire workers, and expand operations based on their expectations about future demand and operating conditions. When that predictability gets shattered, businesses don't just pause their growth plans, they often contract preemptively to protect themselves from uncertainty. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where the fear of economic disruption causes the very disruption that was feared. It's like everyone in a theater simultaneously deciding there might be a fire and rushing for the exits. Even if there was no actual fire, people are going to get trampled in the stampede. So where does this leave us? Are we heading for a recession that will somehow cleanse our economic system and set us up for healthier growth in the future? Or are we creating unnecessary chaos that will make everyone worse off? The honest answer is that we don't know yet, and we probably won't know for several years. Economic systems are incredibly complex, and the effects of major policy changes often take much longer to play out than politicians or markets expect. What we can say is that if the goal is to address specific economic imbalances like speculative bubbles, excessive debt, or misallocation of resources, there are much more targeted and effective tools available than broad-based trade wars and economic nationalism. For example, if certain sectors have too much speculative investment, financial regulators can tighten lending standards or increase oversight. If globalization has created too much economic vulnerability, governments can invest in domestic capabilities and diversify supply chains gradually rather than abruptly. If wealth inequality has become problematic, tax and social policies can address that more directly than hoping an economic crisis will somehow level the playing field. The challenge is that these targeted approaches require patience, expertise, and political will to implement carefully designed policies. It's much easier, politically speaking, to blame economic problems on foreign countries or global elites and promise simple solutions like tariffs or trade wars. But simple solutions to complex problems rarely work as advertised, and they often create new problems that are worse than the original ones. As we wrap up, I want to emphasize something important. Understanding these economic dynamics isn't about being pessimistic or fatalistic. Knowledge is power, and the more we understand how these systems work, the better equipped we are to navigate them and advocate for better policies. Whether we're heading into a recession or not, the underlying challenges we've discussed, excessive debt, misallocation of resources, economic inequality, and systemic vulnerabilities, aren't going away on their own. They require thoughtful, sustained attention from policymakers, businesses, and citizens. For individuals, this means staying informed about economic trends, maintaining emergency savings if possible, and being adaptable in your career and investment planning. For businesses, it means building resilience and avoiding the kind of speculative excess that makes recessions more likely and more severe. And for all of us as citizens, it means supporting leaders and policies that address economic problems with precision and care, rather than those who promise easy solutions to complex challenges. The global economy is like a massive, interconnected machine that affects all of our lives. We can't control it individually, but collectively, our choices about how to manage it will determine whether future generations inherit a more stable and prosperous system or one that's even more prone to crisis and inequality. Thanks for joining us on Econosphere today. If this analysis helped you understand these complex issues better, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into the economic forces shaping our world. And remember, in economics as in life, simple answers to complex questions should always make you a little suspicious. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep thinking critically about the economic narratives you encounter. See you in the next video.